Two unmarked trucks rolled into Elijah's backfield. Engines low, headlights off. Men in dark overalls worked like ghosts. The night was too quiet. Vance stood beside him, flashlight cutting the dark. "Think of the money," he said. It's almost over." A motor coughed. A stream of yellow liquid, thick and glowing, poured into the river. It hit with a hiss, and then the river screamed. Stone grinding on stone, a shriek that tore the sky. The water foamed white. Steam rose like ghosts clawing upward. "Turn it off," Elijah shouted. Vance didn't move. When the pumps finally stopped, silence returned, heavier than before. The trucks left. Vance handed Elijah an envelope. "Proof of payment. The cleanup crew won't be coming." The Kalia River used to sing, a real song. Children learned to swim by its banks. Farmers drew its lifeblood into their fields. Every dawn, the elder, Mama Ilara, whispered thanks to the waters that never stopped moving. Kalia wasn't just a river. She was a goddess. Then one morning the singing stopped. The riverbed cracked and bled dust. Puddles clung to the mud, thick and green, breathing out a sour perfume of rot. This is the story of how that silence began the story of Elijah, a good man who drowned his conscience for a moment of relief, and the curse that followed. Elijah wasn't evil. He was a maize farmer, weary and broke. His truck sat half dead in the yard. His daughter, Lily, dreamed of a university far beyond the valley. Dreams cost money. Debt pressed on him like heat. For 10 years, Kalia had prospered under the old covenant. Take only what you need. Never taint the waters. Respect the azure deep. The azure deep was the river's birth. A pool so blue it seemed to hold the sky itself. Only Mama Ilara was allowed near it. But modern life was louder than tradition. Prices rose. Bank letters came faster. Elijah's mortgage outweighed his harvest. Then temptation rolled into his yard wearing a tailored suit. Victor Vance stepped from a black SUV, smelling of money and confidence. He smiled like someone who had already won. "Elijah," he said, "your land sits on a perfect route. I don't want to buy it. I want your silence and your cooperation." Vance represented a chemical company from the city. They needed a temporary holding site for a volatile fertilizer. Component: 72 hours of storage, then a minor discharge into the local water. "Harmless," he said. He placed a briefcase on the table. $300,000. Enough to save Elijah's farm, pay Lily's tuition, and make guilt look small. Elijah thought of the covenant. He heard Mama Ilara's warning. The goddess provides. But the goddess remembers. But desperation whispers louder than wisdom. "One time," Elijah said, hand trembling. "You clean up everything." Vance's smile widened. "Perfectly clean," he promised. The act of betrayal. 3 nights later, under a bone-white moon, 2 unmarked trucks rolled into Elijah's backfield. Engines low, headlights off. Men in dark overalls worked like ghosts. Elijah followed the hose through the dark until he reached the drop-off. Less than half a mile from the sacred azure deep. The night was too quiet. Even the frogs held their breath. Vance stood beside him, flashlight cutting the dark. "Think of the money," he said. "It's almost over." A motor coughed. A stream of yellow liquid, thick and glowing, poured into the river. It hit with a hiss, and then the river screamed. Stone grinding on stone, a shriek that tore the sky. The water foamed white. Steam rose like ghosts clawing upward. "Turn it off," Elijah shouted. Vance didn't move. When the pumps finally stopped, silence returned heavier than before. The trucks left. Vance handed Elijah an envelope. "Proof of payment. The cleanup crew won't be coming." When the engines faded, Elijah knelt by the trembling water. It recoiled from his touch. He had broken the covenant. He had betrayed the goddess. The morning after, at sunrise, the sky was sickly yellow. Mina the fishmonger pounded on his door, panic in her eyes. "Elijah!" "The river, come see." By the dock, villagers stood frozen. Fish floated belly up, gills bright orange, scales dull as dust. The water crawled like weak tea. Mama Ilara dipped her fingers into the current, then raised her hand. "The covenant is broken," she said quietly. "The goddess has been poisoned, and she will curse the betrayer and all who kept silent." Elijah felt every stare burn his back. He said nothing, but he knew. That evening he opened the envelope, expecting cash. Inside lay a note. The cleanup crew won't be coming. The residue is your problem now. Enjoy the silence. Elijah sat until dusk. Outside, the goddess stopped breathing. Days passed. The air turned heavy with sweetness and death. Children coughed. Goats refused to drink. At the evening council, smoke from cook fires hid fear. Mama Lara faced the elders. The azure deep bleeds, she said. Someone wounded her. Elijah spoke.
I'll go to the district.
I'll bring answers. She looked at him long, then handed him a folded palm leaf. On it, return to the mouth to mend the tongue. He didn't yet understand. The district city glittered like heat stroke. Elijah left water samples at a lab, then walked into Vance and Norwich Industrial Services. Vance met him with a predator's calm. Elijah, you look tired. You lied, Elijah said. You took the deal, Vance replied. We both lied. You killed the river. I studied it, Vance said. Your valley's a perfect test site. Controlled environment, clean data. Don't make it dramatic. Elijah slid his phone across the desk, the midnight video looping. Vance's smile thinned. Delete it, he said. We'll fund cleanup, filters, compensation. You'll thank me. The goddess doesn't sign contracts, Elijah said, and walked out. A woman in a lab coat caught him by the sleeve. Dr. Sifan Dur, toxicology. If it's what I think, she whispered. You'll need lime carbon zeolite. Drop pH bind residues. Do it at the source. Don't boil the water. Don't stay close. Will it save her? You can't erase fingerprints from a throat, she said. But you can loosen the hand. Start at the mouth. Rain began to fall, thick, hot, metallic. Elijah drove home through the storm. Rain fell all the way back to Kalia, chasing Elijah's truck like judgment. When he reached the ridge, the valley looked blurred and sick, a watercolor left out in the rain. The fields were yellowing. The river that once glimmered dark silver now ran the color of rust. He parked outside his house, but the house no longer smelled of home. A damp, chemical smell clung to everything: his clothes, his pillow, even the wooden walls. The goddess had followed him inside. That night, sleep would not come. He heard the river breathing unevenly, like a fevered child. At dawn, he packed a spade, buckets, gloves, and the list Dr. Sifa had. Written, lime carbon zeolite, words that sounded like prayers from a new religion. He was not a chemist, but farmers learn alchemy early. They know how soil speaks. By mid-morning, a jaundiced glow lay over Kalia. Chickens scratched the dust and coughed. Women covered their water pots. A whisper spread through the market. The fish have turned to foam. Mina found Elijah there staring at the stalls. You went to the city, she said. Did you find help? Maybe, he answered, but it will take more than men with machines. Then we're finished, she muttered. Not yet, he said, though the words cost him effort. He left the market and walked toward the riverbank. The smell hit him first metal and sickness. He knelt, scooped a handful of water, and watched it slip through his fingers like melted glass. His stomach clenched. Hold on, he whispered. Hold on to me. That evening, the elders gathered in the square. Smoke from cook fires thickened the air, and everyone looked smaller inside it. Mama Ilara stood before the bowl of river water she had brought. It reflected nothing, a blind mirror. We will not panic, Elder Bako said. We will test. We will send to the district lab. Elijah raised his hand. I'll carry it myself. I know the road. Ilara's gaze pierced him. Go, she said. But remember, you cannot wash blood with blood. Find the source. Do not spread it. He nodded, not trusting his tongue. The villagers murmured blessings, but none met his eyes. He couldn't wait until morning. Under a sickle moon, he walked the fence line to the old shed where the company trucks had stood. The padlock trembled in his hand. Inside, emptiness and a dark stain that refused to dry. He touched it. The smell of ozone burned his nose. A tiny patch still hissed faintly alive. He followed the ditch toward the discharge point. Grass along the bank had whitened overnight. Even insects avoided the place. The river looked still, but when he leaned closer, it seemed to move in slow spirals, as though something underneath were turning in its sleep. He whispered, I'll fix it, and the water gave no answer. Before sunrise, he met Mama Ilara on the path. Her indigo wrap was soaked with mist. You leave for the city again, she said. I'll bring what's needed. She pressed another palm leaf into his hand. Return to the mouth to mend the tongue. What does it mean? He asked. The river speaks at its birth, she said, and the tongue that lies poisons the mouth that made it. You must choose which mouth to heal. He frowned, unsure if she blessed or warned him. Is Lily safe? She is her mother's courage, Ilara said. Keep yours. The city rose from the plain like a promise it couldn't keep. Elijah's truck sputtered up the overpass, tires whining on wet asphalt. He delivered the sample bottles to the district lab. The receptionist barely looked up. Backlog, she said. Come back in 3 days. I can't. My village. 3 days. The word fell like a gate. He left the bottles, but his legs carried him farther, to the building whose mirrored walls reflected only sky. Vance and Norwich Industrial Services. He told the security guard he had a delivery discrepancy. The man waved him through, bored. Inside, the air smelled of polish and money. Vance stood by the window with another man, both of them looking down at the ant trail of traffic. He turned, smiling as if they were old friends. Elijah, you're persistent. You lied, Elijah said quietly. Vance dismissed the other man with a flick of his hand. The door shut. I said a lot of things, Vance replied. Which one troubles you most? You poisoned my river. Our river, Vance corrected. We both signed the deal. I signed nothing. You bribed me. Semantics, Vance said. Your valley is a perfect model, closed system, measurable flow. We learned more in 3 nights than 10 lab trials could teach us. You used us. You used me first. Debt is the oldest trap there is. Elijah reached into his coat, pulled out his phone and pressed play. The video filled the silence. Trucks in darkness, the yellow stream, the boiling water. The room seemed to dim. Delete it, Vance said at last. We'll talk remediation. 6 months, new filtration. Pretty pictures for the ministry. The goddess doesn't take bribes, Elijah said and walked out. He hadn't made it to the elevator when a woman in a white coat stopped him. Kalia, she asked softly. He nodded. She handed him a business card, Dr. Sifandar Toxicology. On the back she had scrawled, calcium hydroxide. Activated carbon, zeolite ratios 3, 2, 1, mix slowly. Your solvent binds to living tissue, she whispered. It suffocates gills and lungs. Neutralize at the source. Don't boil it. Wear masks. What happens if I fail? She hesitated. Then the water learns to remember pain. Elijah swallowed hard. And if I succeed? The river will decide what that means, she said. Good luck, farmer. Rain hammered the glass as he left. Behind him, mirrored windows watched themselves. The drive back took 2 days. He stopped for lime at a quarry, for charcoal at a kiln, for zeolite from a mason who thought he was building a well. Each stop felt like confession. When he reached Kalia, he found sickness waiting. Children with rashes, men coughing blood. The government had sent pamphlets, not medicine. Lily ran to him. Father, they're saying it's a curse. It's both, he said. And I started it. She froze. What do you mean? I'll tell you when it's over. He unloaded the sacks behind the house. Mama Ilara appeared at the gate as if she had known the moment of his arrival. You brought stones, she said. Stones that clean, he replied. She nodded. Then start where the river is born. They reached the azure deep before dusk. The cave mouth exhaled cold air that smelled of rust. The pool had lost its blue. It was perfectly clear, perfectly wrong. Elijah unpacked the powders. Lily lit the lantern. Ilara hummed a chant older than the covenant. He mixed the lime and carbon slowly. The drum heated under his hands. When they poured the first basket into the pool, the water hissed, angry and alive. Steam rose, and through it, shapes formed, arms, hair like river grass, eyes that held eternity. A voice filled the cave. Return to the mouth to mend the tongue. Bind what burns. Cool what clings. Pay what you owe. Elijah knelt, trembling. Forgive me, he whispered. The vision faded. The water shuddered once and began to breathe again. Just before dawn, Lily's voice broke the quiet. Father, there's another one. Behind the shed, half buried, lay a second steel cylinder, leaking tears that smoked on contact with soil. Elijah cursed softly. Vance left us his ghost. They dug trenches, lined them with clay, poured the neutralizing mix. When they turned the valve, vapor erupted, a white scream that clawed their skin. They stayed until it quieted, until the earth stopped trembling. When the steam cleared, Elijah laughed, ragged, half joy, half exhaustion. Lily laughed with him. Even Ilara smiled. By afternoon, the square filled with trucks again, this time bearing banners that said aid and relief. Vance stepped down, coat immaculate. "We're here to help," he announced. "Filters, medicine, funding, whatever you need." Elijah walked into the center of the crowd. He raised his phone and pressed play. The nighttime. In footage projected on a cloth. Screen the children used for movie nights. The villagers saw everything. The hose, the poison. The man who called himself Savior. "This is a misunderstanding," Vance began. Mina flung a dead fish at his feet. "Understand that," she said. Gray-suited aides moved toward the truck. Mama Ilara's staff struck the ground once. The sound stopped them cold. "The elders will speak," she said. "We are not for sale." Vance looked around. For the first time, his smile failed. He signaled his men, and they left. That evening, Elijah and Mama Ilara sat by the azure deep. The water shimmered dull silver, tired but alive. "You confess to the people," she said. "Now confess to the river." "I already did." "Then confess to time," she answered. "It will judge slower but fairer." He stared into the pool. "What will become of me?" "You'll leave," she said. "Lily will stay." He wanted to argue, but saw the truth in her eyes. "She belongs to the water." Ilara smiled faintly. "And you to the road." Rain drummed on the cave mouth as the lantern sputtered. The azure deep exhaled cold air, and the pool held that new, tired gleam, no longer dead, not yet well. Lily wrung out her scarf and tied it tighter over her hair. "Mama." Ilara rested both palms on her staff and watched the surface for the smallest lies. "Again," Elijah said. "They mix the powder slow as prayer. Lime to lower the sting, carbon to drink the poison, zeolite to trap what refused to be forgiven." The drum warmed under his forearms as Lily stirred, shoulders steady, face set. Steam rose when they sank the next basket, smelling first of storm, then of stone, then of nothing at all. The nothing was good. It meant the water was taking back its right to be only water. "Listen," Ilara whispered. The pool gave a single tremor, like a sleeping chest turning to an easier dream. They worked until the lantern ran out, then by dawn's ashlight, feeding the mouth in careful doses until the cave sighed between each offering. When they finally stepped away, Elijah's hands shook with a fatigue that had stopped being physical. He pressed his palms to the wet rock and said, "We'll come back before sunset." "Before noon," Ilara corrected. "A fever breaks faster if it knows you won't leave it alone." They followed the path down. The world smelled less like metal, more like rain. The schoolyard was a clinic now. Basins lined the veranda, each with a label scrawled in charcoal. "Wash only, don't drink. Boil none." A nurse from the district tied cloth masks around children's ears and taught them not to touch their faces. Volunteers moved like tired bees. Elder Bako with a ledger of names and symptoms. Mina distributing soap as if it were jewelry. "Numbers," the nurse said to Elijah. "We need numbers." "Concentrations are dropping at the source," he answered. Downstream, he caught Lily's eye. "We'll test again." A mother stepped forward with a baby listless on her hip. "He won't drink," she said. "When he sleeps, he coughs." Elijah felt the plea like fingers closing on his throat. "We'll bring the safe tank to your house," Lily told her, already moving. "Boil the goat's milk if you must, but not the water." "Wet a cloth and touch it to his lips, slow." The mother nodded, tears steady, grateful and ashamed in the same breath. That was the hardest shape grief made, the one that felt like apology. Word spread that the elders had called a gathering at dusk. Men washed their hands before they came, out of habit and hope. Women tied new wrappers over old fear. Children were told to listen, not speak. Elijah stood at the edge of the circle. Mama Ilara did not begin. She looked at him and waited. He walked to the center, felt the square open like a palm beneath his feet, and spoke. "I brought the men," he said. No preface, no plea. "I took their money. I told myself it was fertilizer. When I learned the word that broke me, solvent, I did not stop them. I told myself I would fix it after. I told myself I would fix it after. I lied to myself until the river screamed. Silence held. He did not dress the wrong with eloquence. He did not blame the price of seed, the bank's letters, the world that had learned to charge breath as if it were a commodity. I poisoned our mother, he said, voice steady. If anything in this valley breathes tomorrow, it won't be because I deserve it. Mina's mouth trembled, but she nodded. El Debaco closed his ledger and set it on the ground. Someone in the back sobbed once and swallowed the rest. Mama Ilara lifted her chin. We hear, she said. Now we answer. She did not ask for a show of hands. She did not need it. You will finish the work you began at the mouth, she said. When the river can keep its own breath for 3 dawns, you will leave. Your absence will be the room we need to heal. Elijah bowed. I will go. Lily spoke without standing. I will stay. No one argued. The river had already decided. They returned to the azure deep with more baskets, masks tied tight. Lily measured in handfuls. Not guesswork, 3 to 2 to 1. The ratio Dr. Sifa had etched on the card, now sweat-soft in Elijah's pocket. Slow, Lily said. Let it eat. Don't force it. He smiled despite himself. You speak as if you were raising a calf. I am, she said, and fed the water its next medicine. Outside the cave, the valley began to shift tones. Dragonflies skirted the surface downstream where film had been. A frog tested a reed with a cautious foot. The world was not well, but it had stopped being only wrong. On their way back, a man in a dust-streaked government vest flagged them down. He had the brittle authority of someone who held a title, without the toolbox to match it. The ministry needs a status report, he said, pen ready. Elijah kept his words simple. Solvent discharge. Neutralization at the source. Concentrations lowering. We need masks, activated carbon and food. The man scribbled, then squared his shoulders. And liability. Elijah held his gaze. There's a name for it. Vance and Norwich. The man's pen hovered, then wrote without looking up. I didn't hear that from you. Then hear this, Lily said, stepping in. Do not tell people to boil contaminated water. Your poster is wrong. He blinked. A child caught drawing the river with the wrong color. I'll update the advisory. Today, Lily said. He nodded and left, papers flapping like frightened birds. They were setting the afternoon dose when a white pickup ground up the track. Vance stepped down with a grey-suited assistant, and a woman holding glossy brochures with stock photos of smiling children and blue water that had never met a factory. He wore a raincoat clean enough to glow. Mr. Elijah, he said, as if they were colleagues, we've brought point-of-use filters for every household, plus a generous aid package. You don't get to be generous here, Lily said. Vance's eyes slid to her. And you must be Lily, future of the valley. I'm delighted to. Elijah pointed toward the cave. Leave the boxes and go. Surely we can discuss terms non-disclosure in exchange for... Mama Ilara's staff struck stone. The sound carried like a bell under water. Terms? She asked softly. We're not buying your tongue. Vance's smile hardened 2 degrees. You'll discover that remediation is complicated without partners who understand its mechanics. We understand mechanics, Elijah said. We turn valves now. He jerked his head toward the trench on the ridge where the second tank had screamed itself empty. We also bury what needs burying. For a moment, the wind dropped, and the cave's cool breath was all that moved. Vance looked into the azure mouth and found nothing in it to purchase. He nodded at Grey Suit, who set the boxes down with careful neutrality. Consider these a donation, Vance said. You'll still need signatures to keep them. We'll consider them a debt paid, Ilara replied. To a river that keeps accounts longer than ministries. They watched the pickup crawl away, the brochures unopened. That night, Elijah called the number on Dr. Sifa's card. She answered on the second ring. You started at the source? She asked. We did. Symptoms. Fever easing. Less coughing. Vish nosing the surface like they remember how. He hesitated. The pool that spoke. Sifa was quiet long enough that static found room to breathe. Rivers talk, she said. I grew up by one that told me when to fear a storm. If yours says anything besides numbers, listen. He told her about the ratios, the schedules, the hiss that had lost its anger. She told him about contact time, how patience could be a chemical property. "Send me any lab sheets when they arrive," she said. "I'll translate them into steps you can hold." "And the company, already molting into a new name," she said. "But they left footprints. And your video, keep copies in 3 places that don't know each other." He smiled despite the ache in his chest. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet," she said gently. "Thank the girl who keeps telling you to slow down." He turned. Lily slept on a rolled blanket near the cave mouth, her breathing even, her hands stained the black-grey of carbon. "I do," he said. Morning found the pool clearer. Not the old blue that belonged to another lifetime, but a tempered silver, like a blade that had been heated and cooled without breaking. Elijah could see pebbles on the bottom again. A small fish, foolish or brave, flashed once and disappeared. They fed the mouth half-doses and watched for tantrums. None came. The water swallowed, sighed, settled. When they walked back, people stood at thresholds with cups in, their hands as if the village itself had cupped its palms to ask a question. Elijah shook his head. "Not yet," he said, and the hands withdrew with little nods of strength. Waiting was a work too. At the square, Elder Bako had strung a clothesline between 2 mango trees and pegged up pages with clothespins. At first Elijah thought it was laundry. Then he saw the sharp black numbers and letters. The district lab had emailed a PDF. Sifa had forced it into plain speech. Bako, who mistrusted screens, had printed it on a cousin's office machine and brought it home like a scroll. "See here," Bako said, tapping the page with a schoolteacher's joy. "Spikes going down. This many days more and we will—" "What is the word?" "Stabilize," Lily supplied. "Stabilize," he repeated, pleased that a word could taste so steady. On the evening of the 3rd day, the elders called another meeting. The square felt different now, not light, but less laden. Even the dogs lay with their chins on their paws instead of pacing. Elijah stood when they gestured. He did not expect mercy and did not argue for it. Elder Bako spoke. "You named your wrong. You mended what you could. We are not judges who pretend that work erases harm." He looked to the hillside, to the place where the cave breathed for all of them. "Mama?" Ilara lifted her staff and took a step that made her seem, for a heartbeat, young. "You will leave," she said. "At dawn." Elijah nodded. "You will not go with empty hands," she added and turned to Lily. Lily approached with a small pouch braided from river reed. Inside, Elijah knew without opening it, lay a black stone from the pool's lip and a coin rubbed thin by the habits of the market. She pressed it into his palm. "Payment to the road," she said softly. "So, it does not think you are stealing its hours." He closed his fingers around it and felt how little and how much it weighed. "Do not look back," Ilara said. "I will fail at that," he answered, and they allowed the human in him to stand. He left before the sun committed to the sky, while mist still argued the valley's edges into softness. He walked past the mango tree and the fence post that had leaned since his father's hands had made it. He touched the gate with 2 fingers and didn't lift the latch. Some doors you leave closed to keep the ghosts employed. At the ridge he turned once. From that height, the river cut a metal-grey thread through green. Light caught the bend below the school and held a note that did not quite become a song. He did not weep. It wasn't pride. He had simply run out of the kind of water that spills out of eyes. He placed the reed pouch under a flat stone at the path's crown and started down the far side. The valley learned new routines. Warning, ring the shell bell once so the river knows you're listening. Midday, test pH with paper that stains pink or blue and argue over the color in good humor. Evening, tell children the story not as a warning, but as a way to keep the map in their heads. The school added a class called Waters and Words. Lily taught it with chalk smudges on her fingers and fieldwork in her pockets. She began each lesson by dipping a clear jar into the shallows and setting it on the windowsill. "What you can't see has more power than what you can," she told them, "and what you pretend not to see has the most." Mina stopped selling fish for a season and turned her stall into a hand-washing station. People tried to pay her. She refused and counted the refusal as profit. When the fish came back in shy, silver commas, she sold them again. But every bag left her table with a paper that said where, when, how. Elder Baco's ledger opened its first page to a new preface, written in block letters large enough for grandchildren. Take only what you need. Never taint the waters. Respect the azure deep. Tell the truth at once. The rule about truth made the biggest difference. It made gossip sharper for a while, then kinder. Dr. Sifa sent a message with a photograph, a room with second-hand machines, a sign on the door that read Regional Water Lab, Kalia Hub, and a ribbon across the threshold that she had cut with scissors, too dull for ceremony. Underneath a note, your numbers built this. Another photo came months later in a newspaper wrapped around cassava. Ministry hearing on undisclosed test sites. In the column, a quote from Sifa, rivers don't care about subsidiaries. They remember names. Someone underlined it in charcoal. It smudged, but the sentence stayed. Advance there were rumors. A new company with a new crest. Then a lawsuit with teeth. Then silence. The kind that meant money had bought a thicker door. The villagers learned not to expect justice that arrived on time. They learned to like justice that arrived at all. One late afternoon, the air went still, as if the valley itself had paused to listen. The river below the school gave a sound like a low flute, no melody, but the hint of one. The students raised their heads. Lily froze mid-sum. No one spoke. They let the sound finish itself. Afterward, the youngest boy, who rarely raised his hand for anything but food, said, "She's not angry anymore." Lily smiled. "She is working," she said. "Sometimes hard work sounds like music when you hear it from far away." They wrote the sentence on the board and left it there all week, so they could grow into it. Mama Ilara rose before dawn every day of her life. But on the morning the mangoes turned sweet, she was slower. She bathed with a calabash of warmed water, tied her indigo head wrap, and moved to the azure deep, with steps that still knew the path, without the help of her eyes. At the pool, she pressed her palm to the surface, and whispered something no one else would ever need to know. Then she laughed, a small sound like a stone knocking, gently against another stone under clear water. That evening, she sat on her stool and looked toward the hillside, the way people look when they are expecting company who does not hurry. Her breath left with her smile still in place. They washed her, oil slicked her skin, wrapped her in cloth the color of riverweed, at dusk, and buried her with a jar of clear water and a strip of palm leaf that bore the riddle she had already answered with her life. At the grave, Lily rang the shell bell once. The sound trembled the leaves, and somewhere below, in the cave that made them all, a current adjusted to make room for something old and something new. Dawn came soft and empty. Mist hung over the fields like breath that refused to leave. The villagers rose to another day that felt both lighter and lonelier. The water moved again, but slowly, as if counting its steps. Elijah's shadow no longer stretched across the square, yet his name sat on everyone's tongue like an act that couldn't decide whether to hurt or heal. He had gone east, they said, or north, or maybe nowhere at all. Just walked until the guilt found a shape it could live inside. Lily stayed. Each morning she struck the shell bell once. The note drifted through the valley and settled into the folds of the river's hum. Children repeated it in play, pretending the sound could keep bad dreams from hatching. At the school, Lily turned learning into labor. She made the older students carry buckets to the shallows and pour them slowly, saying, "Measure with eyes first, not hands." The younger ones drew the story in chalk. A man, a river, a goddess whose hair was rain. "Why doesn't the river sing anymore?" Eargirl asked. Lily smiled. "Because she wants us to listen harder." After class, the children would chase each other down the slope, barefoot, shouting, "Don't taint the waters!" Half joke, half oath. Rains returned, gentler this time. The river rose just enough to polish the stones, but never enough to forget restraint. Farmers learned new patterns, rotate crops, plant reeds where soil slid, leave strips of green to hold the bank. Mina's stall grew busy again. Fish were smaller, yes, but sweeter in a strange way. Flavor laced with a hint of metal that told the tongue the world was honest now. Not perfect, She salted them, smoked them, wrapped them in leaves printed with the new village motto, "Take only what you need. Never taint the waters. Respect the azure deep. Tell the truth at once." Tourists from nearby districts came to see the cursed valley that healed itself. They bought smoked fish and stories. The villagers sold both carefully, one for hunger, one for memory. Months later, the ministry finally opened its doors to the noise Kalia had been making. Dr. Sifa stood before a panel of men in grey, suits and women with pens that clicked like teeth. She showed them graphs and photographs, the midnight dump, the dying fish, the revival. Her voice never shook. A journalist asked, "What does this mean for industry?" "It means rivers are not test sites," she said. "They are witnesses." A silence rolled through the hall. Someone scribbled, someone else coughed to hide agreement. That night her quote hit every paper. "Rivers don't care about subsidiaries. They remember names." And for one whole day, the name Kalia trended higher than the name Vance and Norwich. Far away, in a city that forgot how to breathe clean air, Victor Vance poured whiskey into a glass that cracked at the rim. He stared at a court order stamped with the words criminal liability and environmental homicide. He tried to laugh, but it came out thin, outside his window. The city river, once a bragging point, flowed black under neon. Lightning flashed, and for an instant it shimmered blue, mocking him. The lights flickered. The power went out. In the dark, he heard water moving somewhere close, whispering like an old creditor come to collect. When the lights returned, the floor was wet near the balcony door, though no rain had fallen. Back in Kalia, the villagers raised a small stone monument by the bank. On it they carved the covenant anew, words larger this time, so even those who could not read could trace them with a finger and feel their weight. At the base they set 3 objects in a glass box: a rusted valve handle, a vial of clear water, and a folded palm leaf with faded ink. Visitors asked what the leaf said. The guide, usually one of Lily's students, would answer proudly, "Return to the mouth to mend the tongue." Scholars came, wrote papers, gave lectures. But the locals said the lesson was simpler. Tell the truth before silence costs more. Every year, on the day the river first stopped singing, the villagers lit lanterns shaped like fish and sent them downstream. Each carried a written wish: forgive us, teach us, stay. Children chased the glow until the lanterns turned to stars on the water. Old women clapped in rhythm. Drums returned, cautious at first, then bold. The night air filled with a hum, not quite the river's old song, but something close enough to fool nostalgia. Lily sat by the azure deep, lantern light trembling on her face. "She's humming with us again," she whispered. Mama Ilara's absence pressed against the dark like a gentle palm, approving. A brown envelope arrived months later, delivered by a trader who didn't know who had paid him. Inside was a folded clipping from a foreign newspaper. Headline: Industrial Executive Found Dead in Apparent Accident. Beneath, a short paragraph: Victor Vance, former CEO of Norwich Industries, fell from the balcony of his apartment during a storm. Lily read it aloud to Elder Bako. He nodded once. "The river doesn't travel," he said, "but news does." They placed the clipping under the glass box at the monument. Not celebration, record. Time settled over Kalia like silt. The village learned balance. The water never sang again, but it spoke in small ways: the hiss of rain, the sigh of irrigation canals, the laughter of children dipping their feet at noon. Lily grew lines at the corners of her eyes that came from sunlight, not sorrow. Dr. Sifa visited once a year with students, who took notes faster than they breathed. "The ecosystem adapted," she would say. "Scar tissue that learned how to carry current." Elder Bako aged into a whisper. Mina taught her granddaughter how to smoke fish with patience instead of fire. They all survived enough years to see the story turn into folklore. Then lesson, then lullaby. On the 20th anniversary, a traveler climbed the ridge with a walking stick polished by distance. His beard was white, his shoulders bent. He carried a parcel, wrapped in oilcloth and a limp that matched the rhythm of the old river hum. He didn't cross the gate. He sat beneath the mango tree where everything had begun. A child fetching water saw him and ran to the square. "A stranger's here," she told Lily. Lily came, heart steady, not surprised. She stopped a few steps away. "You kept your promise," she said. "I kept breathing," Elijah answered. He set the parcel down. Inside were papers, a court judgment finding the ghost of Norwich. More money than the ghost could pay. A photograph of Sifa opening the lab. And a letter written in a steady hand. "I did what I could where I went." He placed the reed pouch she'd once given him atop it. "Payment to the road," he said. "And to you." Lily touched his hand. The road accepted long ago. They sat without speaking until the light bent low. Then he rose, walked back to the ridge, and was gone before the bell rang for evening. That night the villagers gathered by the water. Someone asked her, was it really him? Lily answered, "The river decides who visits." They let that be enough. The current glowed faintly under the moon, silver turning to blue, blue fading to grey. Children said they heard a woman's voice deep below, not singing but breathing, slow and patient. Adults smiled, neither denying nor confirming. Faith works best where proof runs thin. Morning laid a thin gold line along the ridge. Mist rolled off the river in long breaths, as if the valley itself were practicing how to live slowly and well. The water no longer flashed with the old brilliance, but it held a steadier light, durable, earned. Lily stood by the monument and traced the carved words with her thumb. "Take only what you need. Never taint the waters. Respect the azure deep. Tell the truth at once." She had lost count of how many times her hand had followed those grooves. She hoped they would outlast her. Children filed down the path with jars and notebooks. The youngest carried a bell made from a river shell, too heavy for his wrists. He held it with both hands, as if the whole valley might spill if he dropped it. When he reached the river bank, he waited for Lily's nod, then struck once. The low note traveled over water and field, a reminder to listen before speaking. "Begin," Lily said. They did what Kalia had taught them, measured pH, took temperatures, noted clarity, counted macroinvertebrates in white trays that turned science into patterns and patience. They copied numbers onto boards in wobbly chalk and argued kindly about whether a shade of pink was really closer to orange. An argument about color, Lily knew, could be an argument about humility, about how much the eye wanted to be right. A girl held up her sample jar. "It's clearer today," she said. "Clear isn't always safe," Lily replied. "Name 3 things you can't see that can still harm you." The girl's hand hovered in the air like a bird learning wind. "Solvent," she said first, because the valley had taught that word early. "Bacteria," she said next, because books had added their voice. She frowned, thinking hard. "A lie," she said at last. Lily smiled. "Good. That one's the hardest to filter." They set their jars on the stones to warm in the sun. Upstream, a heron lifted, unhurried. Downstream, 2 boys skipped rocks, counting in whispers, as if sound might break the river's concentration. The year the rains came late, the hills turned a color between gold and worry. The Kalia slackened to a controlled glide, and the mouths of shallow streams showed their teeth. Old fears woke. People who had learned one catastrophe rehearsed another. "Ration," Elder Bucko said, running a finger down the ledger. "Morning for drinking, evening for fields. Wash with bowls, not basins. Pray with work." There were complaints, necessary, honest. Families argued with themselves about whether need and want could ever be fully separated. Yet the buckets lined up at the tanks the way they were supposed to. The bell rang at dawn, and everyone counted to 7 before they answered. Long enough to remember the last time the valley had ignored a warning. Salesmen arrived with brochures bright as parades. Bottling partnership, they promised. A small dam, they suggested, with diagrams that made math look like mercy. Lily listened with her arms folded and her mouth quiet. When they finished, she walked them to the monument and set their glossy pages under the glass. Box beside the rusted valve, the clear vial, the palm leaf. "We're cured of shortcuts," she told them, "and we're allergic to signatures that make us forget." They left with the same smiles that had brought them, but their eyes searched the path as if it might widen into a road just for them. It didn't. The valley's answer to drought was not a miracle. It was smaller and therefore harder, rationing, mulching, planting shade. Lily's students rigged a gravity-fed drip system that delivered water like a careful sentence, no wasted syllables. The old men nodded, the best praise they owned. The season ended with thin harvests and full shelves of notes. Scarcity taught without cruelty, because they obeyed it early. When the first rain finally came, it didn't announce itself with drama. It began the way forgiveness sometimes begins, unnoticed by anyone who isn't already listening. The bell sounded. The valley exhaled. Years layered themselves into habits. Lily moved the school's main classroom to a long building with open windows that faced the river. Posters of watersheds and proverbs shared the same wall. At the back, a shelf held jars of pebbles labeled by bend and year, a timeline written in stone. Every week, a different child rang the shell bell. The chosen bellkeeper carried the weight with 2 hands, serious as a promise. Before lessons, Lily read a line from the Book of Mouths, a thin ledger Mama Ilara had once used to tally births and debts, now filled with phrases the valley wanted to keep. Return to the mouth to mend the tongue. Numbers are also prayers. A river is not a resource, it is a relative. Visitors came with cameras and questions. Lily's students served them facts the way their grandmothers served stew, hot without apology. When a filmmaker asked for tragedy, the children gave him ratios and recovery curves. When a historian asked for heroes, they gave her a ledger and a bell. After class, Lily walked the path to the azure deep alone. The pool's surface held that same tempered silver, with a suggestion of blue that never quite confessed itself. She pressed her palm to the water the way Mama Ilara had, and listened. Water does not gossip, but it remembers. The cave's breath met hers, and evened it like hands steadying a bowl. "Thank you," Lily said, not expecting an answer, and comforted when none came. The goddess, she had learned, didn't need to be theatrical to be holy. Some evenings, when the heat took its hands off the day, people gathered by the monument to tell the story again. They took turns, not to share attention, but to share responsibility. A child would begin it with the words they had learned, the way their parents had learned lullabies. The Kalia River used to sing. They told it without polishing or pity. They said the man's name when it helped the lesson, and let silence hold it when it didn't. They named the solvent because specificity was a kind of respect. They kept the river goddess alive not by arguing about her, but by obeying the work she required, testing, measuring, telling the truth at once. Sometimes a traveler would flinch at the word curse. The villagers would shrug. Curse or consequence, Mina would say. If it keeps your hand steady, call it both. At the end, they chanted the lines Mama Ilara left them. They did not shout. They let the words enter the mouth like bread. Water is patient. Water is witness. Water is judge. When you betray the river, you betray yourself. Children who had been born long after the white plume still leaned forward, wide-eyed, as if the scream might replay itself in the retelling. It never did. The scream had done its work. Dr. Sifa returned one afternoon with 2 students and a limp acquired honestly. She watched Lily's class test samples with the kind of pride that resists turning into ownership. Afterward, they sat on the step and shared palm wine thin enough to count as hydration. "You built a language here," Sifa said. "People think recovery is chemistry. That's half right. The rest is grammar, how a place learns to speak to itself." Lily tipped her cup. "You brought the first dictionary." Sifa smiled. "I brought a list. You wrote the rules." She reached into her bag and handed Lily a photograph, a new lab wing with the word Kalia etched over the door. "We named it for the place that taught us to be careful with the word after." They walked to the azure deep together. Sifa stood at the mouth and closed her eyes. "It's calmer," she said. "You can hear it in the echo." "We stopped asking it to be what it was," Lily answered. "We started asking how to be what it needs." Keep teaching that," Sifa said softly. "It scales better than outrage." They parted without ceremony. Gratitude, like water, doesn't need applause to be true. 50 years after the white plume, a boy sat with his grandmother on a flat stone by the river. His feet dangled above the water, which moved with the kind of confidence that doesn't need to prove itself. The day had cooled. Crickets rehearsed. Somewhere someone hammered roof metal in a rhythm that sounded like patience. "Is it true the river used to sing?" he asked. She laughed the way old women Laugh when memory and myth have become cousins who share everything. She did, she said. We were spoiled and didn't know it. Was the goddess angry? She wasn't a mood, the grandmother said. She was a mother. Did she forgive us? She remembered us, the old woman answered. That's better. Forgiveness can be lazy if it forgets. Memory keeps love honest. The boy watched the surface flash in small, deliberate commas. He thought he heard a note rise, a hum more felt than heard. He held his breath to keep from scaring it. The sound passed. He grinned anyway, certain he hadn't imagined all of it. Will she ever sing again, he asked. The grandmother looked toward the azure deep, where the cave mouth wore its cool, unreadable expression. She sings differently now, she said. You must learn new ears. They sat without talking. Silence gathered like a shawl, and decided to be warmth instead of weight. A girl from his class ran up the path with a book. Teacher said I could bring this, she told the boy. The cover was frayed, the spine mended with thread. Inside, on the first page, a name was written in careful, ashamed letters, Elijah. The second line said, I did what I could where I went. The boy traced the letters. Was he the villain? He was a man, the grandmother said. Villain is a mask. He learned to take it off and keep his face. Where did he go? Far enough that his shadow stopped reaching us, she answered. Far enough to do good that didn't ask for applause. The boy nodded as if his bones had understood something his language would need time to catch. He closed the book and held it like a tool. That year, when the Festival of Memory returned, the lanterns floated downstream in a line that looked like a constellation. Someone had dropped into water. As they drifted past the monument, Lily, older now, steady, stood and raised her hand for quiet. Today we add a line, she said. She pointed to the stone. A fresh carve ran beneath the covenant, crisp and shallow, where age had not yet had a chance to smooth it. Guard the mouth. Guide the tongue. Share the measure. She rang the shell bell twice, once for the water, once for the words. The sound traveled, found the cave, came back thinner and brighter. People repeated the new line as if it had been there all along. A covenant is a story that remembers how to grow. On the first cool morning after the heat broke, 3 women walked to the azure deep before sunrise. Lily, firm as a stake, Mina, hands clever as ever, and the grandmother, carrying the boy's book to return it to the shelf made of stone. They stood at the lip and let the cave's breath choose the pace. Do you still hear her? Mina asked. Not in words, Lily said. In work. They didn't throw flowers or light candles. They took off their shoes, rolled their wrappers to the knee, and stepped in up to their shins, the permitted measure, no more. Cold climbed their bones with a clarity that hurt and healed at once. For the girls who will teach, the grandmother said. For the boys who will learn, Mina added. For the ones who will forget and need to remember, Lily finished. They stepped out, dried their legs with the same cloth, and laughed the way people laugh when they have agreed to carry a weight together. Late that evening, after fires burned to coals and stories had ended their shifts, a wind came off the ridge that smelled of wet stone. The river's surface gathered small standing waves where the current resisted the breeze. For a heartbeat, the hum rose, fuller, rounder, nearer to a song than it had dared in decades. In the houses closest to the bank, people paused with spoons halfway to mouths. On the school porch, a janitor leaned on his broom and forgot what he'd meant to sweep. At the azure deep, the air cooled 3 more degrees, as if a door had opened to let a guest pass. The sound held, then settled. No one tried to clap. Applause is for performances. This was a reminder. Children asked, "Did you hear it?" Adults said yes or maybe or enough. The story belongs to whoever needs it that night. To the woman who wonders if one lie can break a village. To the man who thinks penance requires disappearance. To the child who wants to know whether a goddess can be both patient and stern. To the elder who knows memory is the only afterlife that changes this life. So they tell it again. The Kalia River used to sing. A man took money to make his problems smaller and made everyone's life more narrow. A goddess did not descend with fire. She waited for them to confess and then told them where to place their hands. They healed by counting, measuring, and refusing to look away. They did not go back to before. They went forward to after, which is sharper and kinder. And every time the water makes a small, low sound, they answer with the chant that keeps their mouths honest. Water is patient. Water is witness. Water is judge. When you betray the river, you betray yourself. Then the chant softens into the fifth line, the new one, the one carved shallow and bright. Guard the mouth. Guide the tongue. Share the measure. The valley sleeps. The river breathes. The story keeps watch. True curses aren't lifted by miracles. They are carried, lightened by work, honesty, and time. The river remembers both the hand that wounded it and the hands that learned to heal.